point.
Yeah, let me just quickly summarize what I just said, you guys. So essentially, remember, the United States will not tolerate any country dominating its region. Again, Americans know if one country dominates its region, it's going to export the balance of power to Western Hemisphere. So that's why every time there is a sign of regional hegemony, the United States goes into conflict. Historically speaking, there have been three regions that have been strategic importance of the United States. It used to be Europe, then Persian Gulf, then Asia Pacific, or as most commonly now it is known, it is Indo-Pacific. Obama administration added the word Indo to include India into Asia Pacific as well. Right now, there has been a switch. So the most important region right now for the United States is the Indo-Pacific, stretching all the way from Horn of Africa, from Djibouti, all the way to Japan. And Japan is the most American ally ever. I'll tell you the reasons why. The question is whether, and obviously, I'm sorry, and then you have Persian Gulf because that's where the oil supply comes. But Persian Gulf is poised to lose its importance to the United States because the US is not as dependent on oil as it used to be. Remember, in 1970s, there was a massive stagflation in the United States. That's because the oil-rich countries of the Persian Gulf basically issued an embargo on the United States for supporting Israel. And United States economy just nosedived. But after that, there has been an energy revolution in the United States, the so-called fracking, meaning the United States has discovered a way to extract the energy on the ground that it has here in the United States. And right now, it's the #1 energy exporter in the world. And this has created another layer of tension with Russia, because Russians believe that the United States wants to push Russian energy suppliers from Europe. This is a question that we can discuss during the Q&A session. And of course, you have the Europe. Europe right now, in terms of importance, is on #3. There is no rising hegemony indeed there. It's a relatively wealthy and prosperous state, and American military bases are scattered throughout Europe, and there is no significant challenge from Russia. Doesn't matter what the news tell you. I personally don't believe that Russia anytime soon will embark on a massive attack on European continent or whatever. So Europe right now has lost much of its strategic importance to the United States. It's the Indo-Pacific, it's the East Asia, which is the most important region for the United States. There is a rising hegemon there, China, that wants to dominate the region that the United States does not want to. American economy is tightly connected to Asia Pacific. That's where the global trade is. America's most important ally are in Asia. You have Australia, you have Japan, you have South Korea, you have, why not, Singapore. You have a country like India that for the first time is about to dominate the Indian Ocean. And of course, during the Cold War, the entire war was focused on European continent. It was a landscape, meaning the most important military branch was the United States Army. Right now, since the entire conflict is focused on the oceans, Asia Pacific is a seascape. The most important military branch for the United States is now its naval forces. The national security policy of American foreign policy will be dictated by the United States naval forces in coming decades. Again, the question is whether China and United States will be able to avoid the so-called Thucydides trap. And China today is building a very China is building a very impressive navy right now, and that has hit the nerve of the United States. Remember, the same way Imperial Germany, it was a continental landlocked power, but for some reason decided to build a navy which British Empire did not like. It was a direct challenge to the British Empire. And the current Sino-American competition, Sino-Chinese competition, is very much similar to that of British Empire and Imperial Germany before World War I. So it remains to be seen how these two countries will navigate these tumultuous times. Let me go to the final slide. So where is the future of conflict? Where is the next conflict that will potentially occur? Is the South China Sea. Right now is the most strategically important region for the United States. As you can see on the map right over here, the red line, that's the entire claim that China has on South China Sea. It is also known as Cow's Tongue. And there are lots of territorial issues right over here. China thinks that it is the rightly owner of this entire sea, which countries like the Philippines, Taiwan, Japan, Malaysia, Vietnam, these countries have their own territorial claims. The United States warships periodically control patrols around this region. Remember, the United States has many military bases scattered around this region as well. The most important military bases being in Japan. Again, why did I tell you that Japan was the most important American ally right now? Remember, during Cold War, it was the Britain. Britain was America's unsinkable aircraft carrier. Right now, Britain's role belongs to Japan. Japan has a navy, military power, naval military power bigger than France and Britain combined together. Japan is an economic and technological superpower. The United States has around 50,000 military personnel stationed in Japan. The entire defense of South Korea, Taiwan, Hong Kong, and other these places depend on Japan. Without Japan, the United States will lose much of its power in Indo-Pacific. Remember, Japan makes United States the resident power in Indo-Pacific. And obviously, United States has territories here as well. Guam is an important naval station for the United States. So again, Indo-Pacific moving forward will be the most important region for the United States. And this is what Trump's administration signaled in 2017. It was becoming clear that China will not obey by the rules set by the United States. There has been several naval standoffs. For instance, in 2012, Philippines and the Chinese almost went into a shooting war because of the occupation of Scarborough Shoal by the Chinese. Again, the question is how the United States and China will handle the 21st century. As of now, this is the most important bilateral relations. It's not US-China, it's not Europe-Russia, it's not Russia-China, it's not Russia-Japan, it's US-China relations. Two economically powerful countries with burgeoning military powers that have ideological, geopolitical differences. And these differences become clear day by day. Even coronavirus has been politicized. Even coronavirus has led to several military standoffs. So the question is how United States and China will cooperate or go into conflict in the next decades or so. But the question is clear. Right now, Washington and Beijing are stuck in a Cold War. There is no way back. No matter who comes after President Trump, no matter who comes after Xi Jinping, United States and China will be locked in long Cold War, call it Cold War 2.0 in the next decades. So I will finish my presentation right over here, and I'm happy to take any questions from you guys, if you have.
Thank you, Eric. Thank you for a very interesting, complex, and insightful lecture. And now, yes, we will open the Q&A session and allow our students to address you their questions. Okay, guys, let's start with the questions. So let's agree on the rule. You are switching on your microphone, you are asking your question, and then you are switching off it back. So let's start. Who has a question? Or you can also type your question in chat section. So yes, Jacob, please.
Thank you very much, Ruben, and thank you very much, Eric, for this very pregnant and interesting and meaningful presentation. Actually, I learned personally a lot about the current state of affairs between the United States and China and the perspective of how they're going to develop in the coming future. My question is more related to other, let's say, spaces of this US-China competition, in particular the cyberspace of US-China competition. And given the current state of development of cyber technologies and all related things, how would you assess, how would you estimate the perspective of one of the sides to win in this cyber warfare between the countries? And is it possible in general to win in a cyber warfare? Thanks a lot in advance for your kind reply and answer.
Thank you very much. That's an excellent question. So right now, the one thing that keeps Americans awake at night is how to stop China from exporting its 5G technology. Remember, this is a critical issue for the United States. The main difference between US and China. In America, the innovation is driven by the private sector. It is really hard for a president to get up one day and tell everyone that this is what we're doing, and then everyone says, okay, no problem, we'll be doing that. United States mobilizes really slow because it's a democratic part. It's a democratic state. You have to have bureaucracy. You have to have the private sector. You have to have the presidency, Congress, the courts, everyone on the same page for the national big strategy. China, on the other hand, Xi Jinping can get up tomorrow and tell people what to do, and everyone will be on the same page the next day. It is a matter of question how effective that will be in the long term. But in terms of like fastness, China has privilege over the United States because it takes the US much longer to mobilize as opposed to China. So for now, the most pressing question for the United States is how to prevent even our allies to subscribe to China's 5G. So remember, Britain gave a green light to China. It's still a question whether they will fully go ahead with this, but China is exporting its 5G. It's ahead of the United States in terms of 5G, development of 5G. And this will allow China to transform it into a military use. In a cyber war, there are daily attacks going back and forth between United States and China. And you actually raised a really good question. Can anyone win in cyber warfare? I highly doubt it, because you can switch off the entire electricity of a certain state and deem it incompetent. Another nation can basically strike back by turning your military satellites useless. So both sides will eventually lose if gone into a full-fledged cyber warfare. No country will exit the cyber warfare as an absolute winner. There will be a toll on both nations. Another important thing that I want to bring up absolutely is the artificial intelligence. Remember, artificial intelligence was invented in the United States. The first experiments going back to early 50s. The advantage the United States has in terms of artificial intelligence is the quality and research. China doesn't do as much research on artificial intelligence the way the United States does. MIT, Harvard, all these great institutions have immense programs on artificial intelligence. However, China has one advantage over artificial intelligence. It has more people living in China, which means more data. Right now in China, no one uses debit cards. No one uses credit cards. No one uses Metro cards. Everything is done through phone. If you want to go buy something, you tap your phone. If you're using the metro, the subway, you tap your phone. And the government collects this data. And what's the heart of artificial intelligence? It's the data. The more data you have, the more predicted outcome you will have when doing your experiments. So again, right now we're in the early stage of 5G artificial intelligence competition between the United States and China. Again, what's the main difference between the original Cold War and the current Cold War? The original Cold War was geopolitical and ideological. Can capitalism and communism work together? Turned out not to. President Ronald Reagan showed and said, we're gonna win, they're gonna lose. Communism was not compatible with capitalism. Geopolitics mattered a lot. This one is even more complicated because it has the technology aspect to it. Remember, Soviet Union made several successful military innovations, but as an innovator state, it was basically impotent. It was incompetent. Soviet Union was not integrated into global economy. Americans could afford going to war against the Soviet Union because economically, Soviet Union operated as a different entity. It was not connected to the global economy. Unlike China, China and America are economically basically connected. China has 300,000 international students in the United States. Most of them go to MIT. Most of them go to Harvard. All of these kids have access to the greatest data and experiments that these universities have. Soviet Union did not have this luxury. No Soviet international students came to America. So the question is how China will integrate 5G into its Belt and Road Initiative, and with economic assistance also start building infrastructure in these countries where it can also monitor what people are talking, what people are saying, what people are saying, what kind of communication goes between government and the people from Beijing. The system they have in China, an intense surveillance system, can be easily exported with 5G. And this is a big concern for the United States because the United States shares military intelligence with its allies. Remember, F-35 jets, the 6th generation stealth jets, is produced by 5 countries. Turkey recently got kicked out. But imagine if United Kingdom, for instance, moves forward with the 5G. This will essentially compromise the many intelligence sharing capabilities that the US has with its allies. So right now, the Secretary of State, Pompeo, goes around urging nations to refuse to take China to the Chinese 5G. It is a great question, and it remains to be seen. Right now, we're seeing that the private sector in the US is stepping in. There have been some improvements. There was the Pentagon cybersecurity strategy of 2017. The White House issued its own cybersecurity strategy the next year. So we're seeing that the United States is slowly but surely waking up to China's challenge of dominating the cyberspace. Again, no American military operation will be as effective without its satellites in the space. Someone sitting in Houston can coordinate between an aircraft carrier in Indo-Pacific, the ground forces in Iraq, and the bases in Europe through all these satellite connections. The question is, what if one of them gets hacked? What if one of them gets taken out? The entire military operation will suffer. So that's an excellent question. It remains to be seen how we go. But in terms of artificial intelligence, US is ahead of, in terms of innovation and quality. China is ahead of data because it has more people. It means it can collect more data.
Thank you, Eric. Any other questions, guys?
Yeah, can I?
Sure.
Thank you for the lecture, and I have another question. Is USA gonna change his as in a domestic international policy? Consider the economical disaster, what will be happen after the virus, what we have, and if it will change the policy. What policy it will be?
If I got the question right, will this virus change the American foreign and domestic politics?
Well, yeah. Yes, like
great. Thanks very much. You guys are asking awesome questions. Thank you. So, absolutely yes. Absolutely yes. Think of this. It's not only going to change the way America operates and thinks about itself. It's going to separate the world into 2 realms. Remember, after the Cold War, the world entered into massive globalization, interconnected economy, connected supply chains, connected information sharing, free travel. This was generally a good news for most countries because it elevated populations out of poverty in many places. There were lots of people who were skeptical about this, that we cannot rely, I'm talking about here in the US, that we cannot rely on certain countries to give us important stuff, to produce our pharmaceuticals, to produce our military equipment. So coronavirus is going to draw a line between the globalization championed by optimists, and right after this, we're going to see the globalization of pessimists. Right after this, in June or July, when they tell you, that's it, it's safe to go out, the world is going to be a much different place. The supply chains are going to be separated. The world is going to be divided into separate spheres of influence. There is a massive call here in the United States domestically to bring key industries back. Right now, the United States, going back to early 60s, 70s, 80s, the United States moved much of its industries from the American heartland, the Midwest, to China. Again, part of the reason was make China rich and it will become the American version of Asia. It did not work that well. So the biggest change is going to be United States is going to eventually move its industries out of China. The process had already begun. Coronavirus is going to accelerate that. It either going to bring part of it back to the United States or going to basically scatter it around among the friendly nations. Look, pandemic hit the United States. Let's be honest, the United States was not well prepared. I'm pretty sure you've seen the news. There has been shortage of protective equipment. There's been shortage of masks. There's been shortage of testers to see if you're positive or you're good to go. Part of the reason has to do because we stopped international travel. Much of this stuff did not arrive from China to the United States. As a result, President Trump signed a federal law urging car manufacturers, including General Motors, to start producing masks and protective equipment. So, in terms of Cold War between the United States and China, it's going to take a level up. Remember, the mass international consensus is that China did not inform the world on time that there is a virus outbreak. They concealed it for almost a month. The first cases were apparent in early November, December. The question was if they let everyone know on time and if they shut Wuhan down on time, we would be able to prevent the travel of people going in and out. And coronavirus as a whole, we could have prevented it. The Chinese concealed it. This is almost the analogy of Chernobyl, you guys. Remember what happened during the Chernobyl disaster? There was a call for the Soviet Union to let international observers, international scientists to come in and help to mitigate the disaster. There was an outright denial and it's all good. We got this, don't worry about this, nothing major. The result was a disaster. The analogy is absolutely the pandemic that we're witnessing right now. There were calls from the European countries, from even Russia, even other nations that we know something is wrong. Something is wrong is happening in Wuhan. Let us come in, help you mitigate this global crisis. There was a rejection. Nothing is happening. We're good to go. It's all good. The result is what we have. So on top of that, China has been spreading several conspiracy theories in terms of the virus being spread in Wuhan by the United States military. And now you're seeing a public diplomacy conflict between these two countries. Remember, the United States has military personnel and warships and submarines throughout the Eurasian periphery, swimming through Taiwan Strait, going close to China. No other nation was able to stop these warships from being deployed. Coronavirus did. Coronavirus did. And there has been, right now, several of America's warships have been sidelined because there were cases of positive tests among the sailors. So another question is, while the world is focused on this pandemic, how to contain it, there has been reports that China built another artificial island in South China Sea. So you're seeing how China basically utilizing this this pandemic to basically push its theory, its version ahead as part of, again, Belt and Road Initiative. In terms of domestic politics and globally speaking, this concerns Europe as well. We're not going to be able to travel as freely as we used to. Now people are going to think about borders more. Remember, you could hop on a train in Amsterdam, go all the way to France or whatever. This is going to eventually slow down. This is not going to happen. There is going to be call in the United States to stop or vent international travels. So the globalization as we know it has come to an end, for better or worse. It shows that, yes, globalization has its good aspects, interconnected economies, the nations talk, nations interact, but also in times of crisis, everyone suffers. Remember, European Union, again, in times of crisis, it shows that there is no such thing as common identity, European. Syrian refugee crisis, there was no coherent response from the European Union. Italians went back to being Italian, Germans went back to being Germans, UK went to being Brits. And each country has its own response to the crisis. The same way to pandemic, the coronavirus. Look what's happening to Italy. How many European countries stepped in to help the Italians? Almost none of them. Because first of all, they're afraid to bring the virus back home. And simply there is no consensus within the European Union when it comes to such tragic events. So this virus has exposed another weakness of the European Union. And who knows, maybe Italy will be the next country to exit the European Union the way the Brits did. In terms of America, it's going to beef up its military power in Asia Pacific. It's going to restrict international travel. It's going to bring several industries back home. It's going to become more self-reliant because it shows that America cannot rely on China during this harsh time. So there's going to be massive changes before and after coronavirus.
Can I,
Thank you,
Mr.
Eric.
Lemurian?
Hold on, please. Do I have time for one more question?
Of course, yes.
Okay, guys, do we have another
Can I?
question?
Yes, can I, Mr. Lemurian? It's Artem.
Oh, sure, Artem, go ahead.
Mr. Husmalian, thank you so much for this interesting lecture.
Thank you.
And I would love to thank you for finding a time for all of us just to make a little bit clear about the United States foreign policy and its goals. So my question is, Mr. Husmalian, as you mentioned, the United States will not tolerate any nation to step on this way of becoming a regional hegemon. So in this case, I would love to make it feel clear for all of us. Are we facing right now some crucial moments in the US-Indian relations, or this close connection in the context of this Donald Trump's historic visit to New Delhi is only the attempt to balance this region and to prevent Chinese ambitions? So thank you so much for—
Guys, honestly, thank you so much for these wonderful questions. All of you have such fantastic questions. I really appreciate that. Absolutely, yes. Good question you brought up here. One thing to know about India. As the United States, remember, like I said, no country should dominate its region. India had its own version of a foreign policy pillar that it really tries to follow. Strategic autonomy, meaning openly do not enter into alliance with any nation, openly do not antagonize any nation, maintain your strategic autonomy. But remember, China and India have massive strategic differences. Remember, in 1967, they went to war. China won. They have an issue regarding Tibet. The Indians are scared that the Chinese growing naval power will eventually encircle India in the Indian Ocean. Remember, Narendra Modi, the current prime minister, he's the head of the Bharatiya Janata Party, which is a Hindu nationalist party. And he thinks unlike his predecessors before him, he thinks in a very geopolitical terms. First of all, India and United States will never enter into an official alliance. This is not going to happen. But India and United States are delicately, low-key, without making much noise, without letting the whole world know, they're aligning their interests together. Remember, Trump is a right wing, Modi is a right wing. They have a lot in common. On top of that, two things you should know. United States and India conduct major naval exercise together, known as Exercise Malabar. It started as a bilateral naval exercise between the two nations, basically a signal to China that we're training together, and in times of crisis, we know how to work together. Later on, there is another strategic relationship that we're witnessing, is the Japan-India relations. Japan and India are working really close together. Why? They both fear the rise of China. So Malabar exercise started as a bilateral naval exercise, but now it includes Japan, United States, and India. Remember, America and Japan are very close allies. Their militaries are very well connected and integrated. So it's about bringing in India into this trilateral exercise. And also going back to early 2000s, there was a talk to bring Australia into this naval exercise. No, it became known as Quadrilateral Security Dialogue, Quad. So essentially, these two foreign maritime powers would exercise together, would work together to create the security diamond throughout Indian Ocean and Asia Pacific, basically as a tacit signal to China. They exercised once, and then India refused to take Australia in. Why? Again, Indians are very delicate when it comes to foreign policy. They realize that it's very useful to work and train with Americans, but bringing in Australia in would be too provocative to China, because Australia has special feelings for, China has special feelings for Australia. So Indians till today continue to push Australia out of this arrangement. So today it's Japan, India, and United States. There has been several important events that shows that India, actually, if things go the way they go, India policy could be Trump's probably the most accomplished foreign policy. There has been, in 2017, there was 2+2 dialogue. Then Secretary of Defense James Mattis and Secretary of Defense Pompeo flew all the way to India to sign this thing called Defense Equipment Act. Essentially now several military equipment that was previously not available to India, now United States exports to India. There has been, again, active naval exercises. Both countries have close economic relations. And remember, India too fears that China will eventually surround its submarines, the Chinese submarines will eventually surround the Indian subcontinent. Again, while India and United States are not making too much noise about this, there is a delicate alignment of several interests. Again, don't expect any official alliance. There's not going to be a US-India version of US-Japan relations. There is a bad history that till today is very relevant. Remember, during the India-Pakistan war, the United States supported Pakistan. So Indians have still bad memories, but geopolitics matters. And Indians know that without the United States, it will be more or less harder to contain the Chinese dragon. And again, India's biggest fear, in case the war breaks out in Himalayas, close to Tibet, the Chinese can encircle with their submarines the Indian subcontinent and hit the Indians from the south. So yes, you're absolutely right. India and United States are working together. There's going to be more intelligence sharing. There's going to be more economic interconnectedness. And I'll tell you what, the United States is now competing with Russia in terms of becoming India's main arms deliverer. Right now, Russia owns 60% of India's market share when it comes to military equipment. United States has upped its game in recent years and has been exporting lots of military hardware to India. We'll see if eventually United States will catch up with Russia or no, but you're absolutely right. India and United States will be working together more closely moving forward.
Thank you
Eric,
so
do we
much.
have time for the last question to bring some
Yeah, if there are any questions,
gender
yeah.
equality into the platform? Anahit?
Can I? Oh, okay.
Okay. Thank you, first of all, for your interesting lecture. And I would like to ask a question. As we know, China is now building and developing a blue water navy that seriously challenged the most powerful seaborne force the world has ever seen, the United States. So we know that now China is beginning to enter regions where US ships have traditionally been located. It's such as visits the Red Sea, the Persian Gulf, the Indian Ocean, and Mediterranean Sea. So my question is, what do you think will this lead to another marine war? And the second question, would it one day be hard sailing through South China Sea?
Wow, holy cow, thanks. I love your questions, I'm serious.
Thank you.
Okay, yes. So think about this. Again, no nation has been able to build blue water navy the way the United States has. The world has never seen such a firepower the way the United States Navy has. It operates 11 carriers, 11 aircraft carriers. No nation has been able to figure out how to build and operate aircraft carriers. The latest class of aircraft carrier, the Ford class aircraft carrier, has 75 top-notch jets stationed. Just one warship has more air force than several nations combined together. It 100,000 tons, 5,000 sailors stationed on it, can operate without refueling for 50 to 60 years. All of them are nuclear powered. They can travel across the world without refueling for 50 years. This is impeccable. Building an aircraft carrier and operating it are totally two different things. Just because you built an aircraft carrier, it doesn't mean you'll be able to operate it. It's almost so, let me put this into perspective. If any nation attacked an American aircraft carrier, it would be the equivalent of the September 11 events when the New York trade towers went down. It would be equivalent of that. $13 billion asset with 5,000 people on it. That's a big no-no for nations to do. You're absolutely right. China is building a blue water navy, and it's done more or less a very impressive job. It's now building aircraft carriers as well. It thinks of having around 6 aircraft carriers. So, historically speaking, the Indian Ocean, the Pacific Ocean, the Atlantic Ocean, there have been American lakes. The United States single-handedly has controlled all these oceans, keeping the sea lanes of communications open, controlling the key important choke points. Right now, the United States is almost unchallenged only in Atlantic Ocean and in the Pacific Ocean. Things are much harder. Things have become much harder in the Indian Ocean. For the first time, we'll see Indian Ocean being dominated by an indigenous power, by a power that is located in the region and not the United States. What will this happen?
Eric, I'm sorry to interrupt you here. Sorry, guys, but actually our session is running out of time. Sorry again for this technical issue. Again, we prepared the platform to have full time, but I don't know, kind of technical problem occurred. So I want to stop here and thank you once again, Eric, for your wonderful, outstanding lecture. I hope very much that we'll have another opportunity to host you during our lecture. And thank you, guys. Thank you for your active participation. So see you next week. Thank you, Eric.
Thank you very much. Thanks for your question. I'm sorry, maybe I can send the answer to you through Dr. Lamirian or, yeah, sorry I didn't get a chance to answer.
Thank you.
Thanks very much for joining.
Yeah, I will definitely pass the answer, so thanks for this.
Thank you. Have a good day, you guys. Please stay safe.
Hey, have a good weekend.
Yeah, thank you very much.
Take care.
Yeah.
Had a nice day.